5:30, so I will call the meeting to order and ask that the clerk take roll, please.
Branch.
Here.
Bray.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather.
Here.
Schulte.
Here.
Scrivener.
Okay, the purpose of our meeting tonight is to continue with budget discussions. So at this time, I'll open the floor to any council comments and/or motions to be made regarding the budget. Mr. Henry.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Yes, sir.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion restoring $55,000 from our fund balance into JCTV.
Okay, we have
And I second his motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to restore $55,000 to JCTV. Discussion. Mr. Henry.
That would also be contingent upon Lincoln and JCTV's willingness to renegotiate the contract as well.
Okay. Is that part of your motion?
Yes.
And your second's okay with that? Discussion on the motion?
And that's from fund balance.
Correct. Mr. Hussey.
I guess just a quick question. Well, he's bringing it up now. Where's the fund balance sit at right now?
It was at $77,113.71 prior to the motion.
Okay.
So we'd get it down to 22,000 something.
Okay. Thank you.
Other discussion? Mr. Graham?
As someone who works for Lincoln University, I would like to recuse myself from the vote.
Okay. Mr. Scrivener?
I wasn't here for the motion, so what's the motion based on? The 55,000?
Yeah, the motion that was made was to restore $55,000 to JCTV from the fund balance contingent upon the city and Lincoln University working out a contract agreement. And the motion was made by Mr. Henry, seconded by Mr. Bray.
Okay, and I guess my question for Mr. Henry is, what's the 55,000 based on? Is it, have you had conversation with Lincoln University? Is that based on some, some level of funding that they feel they can live with, or where'd that number come from?
Well, that was basically like the third of the original 165 that we had. That was just something that I wanted to put back, possibly if we could do it. Fund balance was the cleanest way that I could see at this time.
Mr. Prather?
It was stated in, I guess, earlier that if we decided to eliminate the contract, void the contract, we would have so many days, and there was a cost associated with that. Does anybody know what that cost was?
I had asked Mr. Hilpert for that. Mr. Hilpert?
Sure. The contract is $110,000 currently. We have to give 90 days written notice to terminate it. It comes out to be $9,100 a month or so. And if the council decided, if they passed the budget on Tuesday, and there was not full funding in the budget, then we would have to notify them of our intent to terminate. Obviously, with there's $55,000 in there, there'd also be an intent to renegotiate. But if everything goes bad, for example, if we sent the notice on Wednesday, the contract specifies that it's the second day after mailing that's the first day for notice. So in other words, September 6th would be our first day of notice. It would become effective December 4th. That would be 34 days into the new year. So we would owe them $10,246.58. That's what we'd owe them if we just cancel the contract. But again, if the motion passes and we're able to negotiate, we can negotiate those terms into the new agreement, whatever the format that is.
I have a question, Mr. Henry, and if you know, as the liaison to JCTV, if we provide them $55,000, do you know, would it be their intention then to fund the balance out of their budget? I understand they just finished their budget process. Would they fund the remaining portion then, or would Lincoln University fund the remaining portion? Do you know?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Hussey?
I guess for Mr. Henry, the assumption is we're going to fund primarily the services or programming of the city, so city budget meetings, city council meetings, commission meetings, and Ms. Enlow's kind of proposal back to us, her initial estimate, I think, was, what, 67,000, but that included things like the ice show, the parade, Capitol caroling. I don't know if that's direction we would need to give the city staff to negotiate the contract, or if it's I guess the same question. I just want to make sure we're very clear when we say 55,000 what our expectation of service is, because I doubt we're going to get the same service that we're provided now at that same cost, right?
Well, and I would assume that it would be city services, and whatever else they could provide with that. I know Gloria's here. I don't know if we would want her to kind of speak on that a little bit, but I mean, I would think so.
If I can, and maybe this would be an amendment to your motion, we have in the budget still $5,000 budgeted for a part-time camera person, or which I'm assuming if we renegotiated a contract with Lincoln University for JCTV to provide the services, we wouldn't necessarily need that any longer. So could we in theory allocate 60,000 or remove that $5,000 that's budgeted? Everybody's looking at me as though I'm I guess I'm just trying to clarify, like, there could be some more funds, because if we're budgeting 55,000 right now, do we still need the $5,000 for the part-time person? Could we get creative, or maybe the next motion could be to remove that from the budget, put it back in fund balance at that point? But I just thought of it was still in there. We're not going to need that 5,000 then.
You're correct, there is 5,000, so if you'd like to make a motion now or wait, your choice. I mean an amendment to the motion. Okay, other discussion? Seeing none, roll call please.
Branch.
Aye.
Bray.
Aye.
Carroll.
Aye.
Graham. Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schulte.
No.
Scrivener.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have 55,000 going back to JCTV out of fund balance. Other discussion. Mr. Hussey.
I would move that we take out the $5,000 for the part-time camera person and add that 5,000 back to fund balance.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to remove 5,000 for the camera person and put it back into fund balance. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Who's second?
Mr. Mahalovich. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Branch.
Aye.
Bray.
Aye.
Carroll.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schulte.
Aye.
Scrivener.
Aye.
Motion carries. Any additional discussion? Mr. Scrivener.
I move that that we take 14,000 from the fund balance and fund the request by the HR department for the software of approximately $14,000. I don't remember the exact amount.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hussey was the second to fund the HR software at 14,000 and remove that from fund balance. Mrs. Strope.
I'd just like to give you some information. You guys had asked about some information on return on investment, so I've spent some time with a couple of the companies in the last 2 weeks talking to them, and one of the companies has lowered their bid considerably down to $9,500. So I think if you wanted to change that from $14,000 to $9,500, that would be good.
Thank you.
Yes, I withdraw my first motion,
Okay.
and you want to withdraw your second?
All right.
And then I will make another motion that we accept, or that we fund the approximately 9,000
500.
what was it, 9,400?
500.
500, 9,500 software for the same purpose.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Scrivener, a second by Mr. Hussey to fund $9,500 for HR software to be funded by the fund balance. Mr. Henry?
Gail, that still gets you what you need as far as the software goes?
It will,
Okay.
absolutely, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Prather?
What are the ongoing costs in addition to the 9,500 potential that we all have in the years to come?
The ongoing costs, the first year this would be included, but in years 2, so in future years, it would be about $7,000 would be the ongoing maintenance. The company that I mentioned that, dropped their rates, they would lock that rate in as a guaranteed rate for future. So we wouldn't be looking at that rate going up year after year after year.
Mr. Prather?
Just a follow-up, will we be making an effort to find the cost savings that this software creates?
We would. Definitely, a lot of it is soft costs as far as time type savings. But I do believe that hard costs, we would be looking at between $4,000 and $5,000 a year.
Mr. Mihalovich?
It's not too atypical for software packages to have about 20% maintenance or annual renewal fees, so that seems a little high for annual renewal.
The 7,000 does? Yeah, I mean, it includes all upgrades, all future upgrades forever, and like I said, it locks in that price. So if we continue with that company 20 years from now, our cost would be the 7,000 a year.
Mr. Bray?
Make sure I understand, the $7,000 is annually?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's
Thank
the ongoing maintenance subscription price, basically, to that software.
And this is for online applications?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a part-time position handling that now?
We have, well, 2 of our employees share that responsibility right now. One is one of our full-time employees, and one is our only part-time employee are sharing that.
All right. Thank you, Gil.
Mr. Scrivener?
I too am kind of surprised how much the annual cost is, but I think the $14,000 package was like $9,000 a year, if I remember right, ongoing cost. Is that pretty close to being right?
It is, yes. They did lower that annual subscription price
down. So is this the same company that initially? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one question that I would ask, would any of the competing softwares, even though they had a higher initial cost, have a lower ongoing cost that maybe over a period of time would yield a lower cost over 10 years or what have you?
Yeah, there's a couple of companies, there's a few companies that we've talked to, met with, done evaluations of their software and that kind of thing, just trying to check out the whole process. And most of them are all very similar in price. So if this is passed, we know what the highest cost that we would have, but we would go to all of the different companies and get quotes from them. So, I mean, it's possible that some of the others would come down and match this price also, and it's possible that some may come back and maybe offer the lower ongoing price too, because there's some very good competitive companies out there.
The reason I support this, the software, is because the numbers that we heard before would indicate that a software package, whether it's this one or whichever one you settle on, as long as it's in this price range, will more than pay for itself in a very short period of time. So, I don't know which is the best software package. I certainly am not real anxious to be tied into one that has an ongoing cost forever, but that's the nature of software packages. If you have upgrades and you said it's online, so I don't know if there's any kind of a interface cost that we have with them or not. But at any rate, it hadn't changed my mind. I'm still in favor of it as a way to gain efficiency and maybe use staff in HR in a more productive way than just sitting and entering data.
Other discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Bray,
No.
Carroll,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Henry,
Aye.
Hussey,
Aye.
Mahalovich,
Nay.
Prather,
Nay.
Schulte,
Nay.
Scrivener,
Aye.
Branch,
Nay.
5.
5-5, motion fails. Mrs. Carroll.
Oh, thank you. I move that we put $7,500 from the fund balance for 2 floating holidays pending council approval, pending the outcome of the vote on Tuesday night.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to provide funding for 2 floating holidays pending council action on Tuesday, for floating holidays to be funded out of fund balance. Is that correct? Discussion. Mr. Mahalovich.
What is the amount that you're,
7,500.
Other discussion? Mr. Bray?
How did you arrive at that figure, please?
I might ask staff to clarify so I say it correctly. I'll ask Drew, and that would be the amount for the 2 floating holidays that are in the proposed ordinance.
You know, the reason I know is because I had to draft an ordinance, or Ms. Carroll asked for a substitute for Monday. And Bill and Sheila can probably do it better, but it's fireman step-up pay, and I can pull up the numbers exactly. Well, Sheila's probably doing it right now. No. Fireman step-up pay, Social Security, and retirement. Those are the 3 that would be effective if you, and we can go into further explanation, but I know we've talked about it before.
Further discussion before we vote? Roll call, please.
Carroll,
Aye.
Graham,
Nay.
Henry,
Nay.
Hussey,
Aye.
Mahalovich,
nay?
Prather,
Nay.
Schulte,
Nay.
Scrivener,
Nay.
Branch,
Nay.
Bray,
No.
Motion fails. Any other discussion? Any other? Mr. Bray?
I move to forward this budget to the city council.
We have a motion to forward this, the budget as amended to the city council. Do we have a second?
Aye.
We have a second.
Mr. Branch.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Hussey.
Quick question. I'm new to the process, so we're the budget committee, but we're also the council. So it forwards it to the council. The council still has to have final approval. There is still opportunity at the council level to amend the budget. Am I correct in that assumption?
That is correct.
So this is a vote to move it forward, not necessarily indicating approval of the budget.
This is the recommendation of the budget committee to move it forward to the full council for approval. And yes, there is an opportunity to make amendments to the budget, but I would hope as a council that we would try to do as much of that in the budget committee as we could. But I understand there is that option, yes, sir. Further discussion? Mrs. Carroll.
And this is more, I guess, clarification too. I was thinking this with the first motion where it says fund balance, that the public would understand too, that's not the entire fund balance. That's what we moved from contingency over to fund balance, just so there's no, like if they see that line on the screen, or just so they understand, that was formerly contingency. If they missed, let's say, the last meeting, that it was moved over there. So I wouldn't want them to think that's all that's in the entire city's fund balance.
You are correct.
So
That is anticipated excess revenue for the 2014 budget.
right. And I guess if we're taking comments on the motion, I'm okay with moving it forward. I do think at the next council meeting, though, The motion I made just failed, and there was no discussion. I didn't really expect discussion, because I know the night when we actually introduce it, then the discussion would happen. So I would just ask council to maybe contemplate over the weekend as we think about it, that the cost, there is a hard cost in the budget, and staff has helped us arrive at the 7,500. There's also the productivity aspect of it, and we know that, but looking at that particular piece, I hope we as a council can decide if there is something in this budget that we can offer to our employees. And this is a solution. It's a very relatively low cost, so I would hope that we could look at making that amendment on Tuesday night after we have some thought and discussion, and place a value on the employees, that we're asking them to work harder with less and show some appreciation in a way, since we were not able to offer increase in salary of any kind. So I'm hoping that that's something we can value, because we have it. We have the funds, we have the availability to do it. So I hope that we can make that decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Scrivener?
I get the feeling that one of the impediments to passing the $7,500 is not so much the $7,500 as it is a lack of I don't know what the right word is, but I think there's still a doubt in some council members' mind that the cost will, in fact, the hard cost will, in fact, be $7,500. I think that everyone sitting here understands, or at least feels in their mind, that there will be a productivity loss. And I know that the administrator has indicated both his belief, which I'm not going to question his opinion, because we all can have opinions. But in his opinion, there will be a productivity gain because of increase in morale and so forth. And he's also very firm in his belief that $7,500 is a good number. So I would encourage the administrator and other staff members to, I guess, go back and try to confirm those numbers and make their case, I guess, between now and Tuesday. So that if there is any doubt in the minds of councilmen, and I believe there is, about the validity of that number, that maybe those doubts can be removed. I just think we have a difference in how we perceive what it's actually costing the city for that. And I, for one, I'm pretty comfortable with that number. I understand where they're coming from with it, and I really, I'm more concerned about the productivity loss than I am about the $7,500. I really kind of trust that number. But anyway, I would just urge you to the extent you can. I know you've already worked on that pretty hard as far as the numbers. Now, they're probably not going to change, but if you can come up with some kind of a way to put that in writing, or put it in a form that can gain more acceptance, then I would urge you to do that if that's something that you really feel strongly about.
Thank you. Mr. Mihalovich?
If we conclude this on this vote, which I'm in favor of, I want to get the chance to say I think this budget process has been much better than last year. I congratulate the chair on the process, the openness, and getting us to this point. I feel pretty comfortable with this budget. The only thing I don't feel comfortable about it is our contingency. We've whittled that down to 27,000. Is that correct? Correct. And it's my understanding that we're not going to have a lot of carryover this year. If we do, it'll be very minimal.
The contingency's gone. It's 0, not 27.
27 in fund balance.
Thank you. And then it's my understanding also that our end-of-year funds doesn't look like there's going to be very much to be rolled over into fund balance, if anything at all, because we're still close on our sales tax revenue projections. So I'd feel a lot better if we had a little bit more cushion on that. And so my question is this. November 1 starts, and you, through this budget, have a green light to hire both a finance director and fire chief, right? Is that correct?
My understanding, we have funding for 6 months of a fire chief.
Yeah, only half of the fire chief.
Half.
Okay. So then you start this process November 1, correct?
With the finance director, not with the fire chief.
So likelihood, what would happen to that budgeted money that we have in the finance director until such time as you get that position in place?
Well, it would go into essentially what we call vacancy savings, and ultimately would go back into the fund balance. My recommendation, as I sent out to all of you all today, since the council clearly thinks that this is the top priority, then we should act on our beliefs and get an interim in right away. And there are services that will provide us an interim, and I would recommend using that money to pay the interim until we can have a full person, in place.
Point of order. I don't know that that's relevant to the motion.
I believe that is correct. Discussion about funding of, there's a motion on the floor to adopt the budget and pass it, or to recommend the budget to the council. And so I understand your comment, Rick, but that's probably a different motion would have to be made for that, and there's already one on the floor, so. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Graham,
Aye.
Henry,
Nay.
Hussey,
Nay.
Mahalovich,
Nay.
Prather,
Aye.
Schulte,
Aye.
Scrivener,
Aye.
Branch,
Aye.
Bray,
Aye.
Carroll.
No?
4 no.
Motion carries 6-4. Any additional comments before we adjourn? Mrs. Carroll.
Just wanted to see if Rick would continue his comments from previous.
I think I'll carry that forward maybe for our next council meeting.
Any other comments? Mr. Bray?
Yeah, at the last budget meeting, I made the comment that I had received phone calls regarding delays here at the city, and to clarify, I had conversations, and also in further conversations with Janice McMillan, I've learned that the delays do not occur in her department. They're elsewhere in the city. So I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion, comments? Mr. Scrivener?
I voted to move the budget on to the council because I really don't think that we're going to make any more changes to it. But I, like Rick, am concerned about the, maybe for a different reason, but about how tight the budget is and so forth. And I'm still not comfortable with the idea that we're going to fund a finance director and a fire chief. I may very well vote no on the budget, even though I think I'll be in the minority. I may very well vote no whenever the time comes on Tuesday night for those, because of those two concerns. And I certainly wouldn't be in favor of hiring an interim finance director for the simple reason that just the time that it takes to hire a finance director will create a little bit of cushion for us in those few months. Even though we funded a full year for a finance director, we won't have one for the full year. So just by accident, we're going to have a little bit of cushion that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Thank you. Mrs. Carroll?
And I think because of that cushion, I'd like to know, because I think there's a little bit of leeway, certainly probably a $9,000 or $10,000 leeway, but I would ask Gail Strope if you could present us, and I know you sort of went over it, but I don't know if, I don't remember having the more direct dollar amounts, but the software, I'm just curious what the decision we made tonight to bypass and to not purchase the software, what that will cost us if we had it compared to not having it. Your employee cost of entering, I know you had a number of how many thousands of applications you get, and there is an hour per application, let's say, but I know you threw out those kind of figures, but I'm just curious if you could narrow that down. Is that something you'd be able to do to provide us a cost? That way we can look at the impact of our decision to not purchase it versus the impact of buying it plus the yearly maintenance, to really get a pinpoint on when that would pay for itself and what it's going to cost us by not having it. More of a narrowed down figure, if you could. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this side? Down here? Okay, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.